Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. We're covering what has to be one of the most astonishing timelines in medical history. When the world basically ground to a halt a few years ago, it felt like the scientific cavalry arrived almost instantaneously, didn't it? One minute we're facing this completely novel threat, and literally the next, boom, we've got a revolutionary new class of medical technology rolling out globally. The media was calling it a modern marvel. But if we actually look at the data and the history, we see a completely different, honestly much more fascinating story. Because it wasn't an overnight success at all. It was a grueling 30-year grind of persistence. Think about the number 2 for a second. That is the exact number of days it took Moderna and biotech to design a vaccine once the COVID-19 genome was published back in January of 2020. Just 48 hours. I mean, think about traditional drug development. You usually measure that timeline in years or even decades, right? Yet they had the blueprint ready before the weekend was over. Which, of course, begs the question, how is a medical miracle like that even physically possible? You can't exactly just throw unlimited money at a biological problem on a Friday and expect a globally viable solution by Sunday. Let's break this all down. Part 1, the 2-day miracle. But to understand that miracle, we really have to look backward. Part 2, the 30-year struggle. The real secret behind that lightning-fast turnaround isn't that they rushed the science in 2020, it's that the hardest parts of the science were actually already finished. And that foundation rests heavily on the shoulders of a Hungarian biochemist named Katalin Karikó. Back in the 1990s, when she first proposed using messenger RNA as a drug, the scientific consensus was flat out against her. The prevailing wisdom at the time was that introducing foreign mRNA into the body triggered massive, dangerous inflammation, so it would just never work as a viable therapy. But she wouldn't let the idea go. And because of that, she was actually demoted in 1995. She spent the late 90s and early 2000s just having grant after grant denied. And even after her eventual breakthrough in 2005, she faced another 15 straight years of rejection from major pharmaceutical companies who simply didn't want anything to do with it. It's wild to think about. Which brings us to part 3, the invisibility cloak breakthrough. Because despite all those demotions and the lost funding, Kariko just didn't quit. Instead, she teamed up with an immunologist at the University of Pennsylvania named Drew Weissman. Together, they started looking at the actual building blocks of the RNA to try and definitively solve that dangerous inflammatory response. Now, one of those standard building blocks is called uridine, and they discovered that this was the main culprit. It's exactly what triggered the inflammation and caused the body's immune system to attack and destroy the mRNA before it could even do its job. Their absolute genius was a molecular swap. By replacing uridine with a slightly modified version called pseudouridine, they effectively put an invisibility cloak on the mRNA. The body's immune system just stopped attacking it. So the really crucial point here is that this swap didn't just stop the inflammation, it completely transformed the playing field. By avoiding immune system detection and preventing the inflammatory response, they finally stabilized the mRNA molecule. For the very first time in medical history, mRNA could actually survive inside the human body long enough to act as a viable medical therapy. They basically had the perfect biological software. But there was still a huge missing piece. Part 4, the delivery vehicle. You see, having a perfectly stable mRNA payload is, well, completely useless if you don't have an armored delivery truck to transport it directly into the actual cells. The human body is an incredibly harsh environment, and even with that invisibility cloak, this super delicate biological software needed physical protection to get across the cellular membrane. The formulation innovation that solved this massive logistical hurdle was lipid nanoparticles, or LNPs. You can think of them as microscopic fat bubbles specifically engineered to safely encapsulate, protect, and transport delicate molecules right into your cells. And just like Kariko's mRNA, this didn't happen overnight either. The concept was pioneered by scientists like Patrick Couvreur and others who fought incredibly hard in the 1990s to make nanotechnology acceptable to big pharma. They had their own massive uphill battle to prove these microscopic delivery trucks were actually safe and effective. This quote sums it up perfectly. Without LNPs, mRNA would never reach cells. It is truly that simple. You can have the most elegant, cloaked, stabilized messenger RNA in the whole world, but without the meticulously designed lipid nanoparticle delivery vehicle pioneered by Couvreur and his peers, Kariko and Weissman's breakthrough wouldn't matter at all. It was the convergence of these two separate, hard-fought technologies that ultimately changed everything. And that sets the stage for where we started. Part 5, the platform was ready.
When January 2020 rolled around, we were absolutely not starting from zero. We were starting from step 99. The architecture was already completely built. Step 1, perfect the mRNA payload so it doesn't trigger inflammation, done by Kariko and Wiseman. Step 2, build the nano delivery truck to get it into the cells, done by Kuvar and the LNP pioneers. So, when that COVID-19 genome was published, all Moderna and BioNTech had to do was step 3, plug the new genetic sequence into the existing, perfectly calibrated system. That is exactly why it took just 48 hours. The grueling 30-year foundation of perfecting the platform had already been completed by these underdog scientists who flat out refused to take no for an answer. Which leaves us with this crucial, perhaps slightly uncomfortable question to ponder. What other 30-year overnight successes are being ignored in labs today? I mean, if the foundational technology that ended up saving millions of lives was repeatedly denied funding, dismissed by the scientific consensus, and outright rejected by the pharmaceutical industry for 15 years, whose rejected grant proposals right now are holding the biological keys to our next medical miracle? It's definitely something to keep in mind the next time you hear about an overnight breakthrough.